Welcome back. Now, for many of us, the holiday season is filled with joy and happy memories, but for others, it simply isn't the case.
Any special occasion or first can be difficult to cope with when you're bereaved or feeling lonely. And that's why we have psychologist Alison Keating joining us with some advice. And so many people, Alison,
Morning,
it's a
Alison.
lovely, cheery time. Good morning. But it can be a very tough time for those missing loved ones.
I think because it's such a happy time,
Yeah.
that sense of, you know, that everyone around you's happy and it's kind of coming from every angle. And when you feel completely different to that, like literally your heart's breaking.
So you're at odds with the whole thing.
You're completely at odds, and it's like this mix match, you know. And I think sometimes the problem is that people force themselves to be happy when they're not. So I suppose I just say to people, look, it is what it is.
Yeah.
And it is incredibly hard when that person's missing at the Christmas table. How can you not? And I suppose in one way, there's no solution to grief, you know.
It's also layered as well. Speaking from personal experience, we lost our mum, no, it's 28 years ago, but it was 3 weeks before Christmas.
Oh, yeah.
And I remember exactly that. And my dad, God be good to him, trying to keep the Santy thing going. And because my little sister was only 13.
Okay.
And I remember my nan and granda coming to the house, and it's just, it's the elephant in the room, because there's an empty chair, you know, certain things that she did weren't being done that day.
Yeah.
And you're trying to put that face on, but inside all of you are dying.
Yeah.
Absolutely dying, but you feel you have to go through it.
Yeah.
Because it's the first one. And it'll make the next one easier.
And you know, it is interesting. And when you're saying, I think the first really is incredibly difficult.
Yeah.
But then I also think the next one's really difficult. And sometimes, you know, it's interesting. Someone said to me once, actually, the fifth was really hard because I realised they really weren't coming back.
Oh.
And I don't actually believe that time heals. No. But I think that the process of grief is to acknowledge. And I'd often say to people, talk about it. And everybody's afraid, especially parents, that they don't want to bring down the day. And even when there are children, people think, oh, I don't want to ruin Christmas for them. But then the kids kind of are taking cue from the parents and they're like, I better not ruin it as well. So if people just say, look, actually, I feel really sad today. And actually have a chat about it. And
speak out and talk.
Actually talk about it and not be afraid, as I say, of the elephant in the room, and actually name it and say, actually, I really miss mum, or I really miss dad. And people will cry. But there's an acknowledgement, and in a way, it actually can be
It's
a
actually
nice
a great
thing to
trigger,
do.
because sometimes you can end up in laughter, because you'll end up saying, God, do you remember the time they did the thing with the thing, and they fell over the thing, and you did the...
she burnt that and whatever.
But you know, so it is part of that process, I suppose, isn't it?
I think you're totally right. And again, when people are grieving, they can be quite surprised at the roller coaster of emotions. That 1 second you might be crying, the next second you might be bursting out laughing. Do you remember she forgot to cook the turkey? Like, do you know what I mean? And then back to the tears. And I think if we just let ourselves go with whatever's coming up for you, and don't feel guilty for having the laugh.
Yeah.
You know, and in one way, actually, I think, and it sounds odd, but when we actually have a laugh, there's such a kind of a release in it. And in a way, you are acknowledging something funny, that the person, that you're keeping a live memory of them. Sometimes I think it can be nice to put a picture of the person in their spot, just to kind of, you know, have them in your mind, that their you know, their presence is there. But just allow yourself to have what type of Christmas you want to actually have as a family. Maybe a conversation beforehand, where some people might say, do you know, I actually can't put the Christmas tree up this year, or I can't do the cards.
But that's okay, isn't it?
Totally okay, yeah.
You know, or even if you want, we were chatting in makeup earlier on, when we were saying, well, one of your tips here is to, you know, change your traditions maybe. Change your surroundings.
Yeah.
So here's your generally tips to get through it all.
Absolutely. And I think, you know, if, say the first, you could actually go away, because like you were saying, it's that kind of sense of, it's the home that's bringing up the memories. So sometimes maybe that's the trigger of the painful thing. So just be really compassionate to yourself and to your family. You know, do talk about it. Don't be afraid of ruining Christmas. It's already really hard, and I think maybe accepting that it's hard is better than the kind of the sense of pent-up sadness that it's not going to be the way you want it to be. But I think it's just giving yourself the permission to lower your expectations and to be there together. And I think that will actually allow you to kind of have a sense where you can actually talk about the person even I like the idea of planting like a tree in the garden, or you could do something on that day that actually is very kind of symbolic. That you're putting something there that each year, and there's a new tradition that each year you go out to the garden, light a candle, or do something.
Lovely.
Yeah, just something that is very meaningful. And I suppose when we look at Christmas, it's about what's the meaning of Christmas for you. It doesn't always have to be of full cheer. And I think it's that sense of forced cheer that causes the upset for people.
I like as well the fact that you said there's actually no correct way to grieve.
No.
It's so individual,
Everyone
isn't it?
does it differently.
Yeah.
Circumstances have a lot to play in it. How they might have passed on
Yes.
suddenly or over a long time. There's no right or wrong
There's
way
no
to do
right.
it.
And I do think that people think like basically that after the first year they need to be getting on with it. I mean, I literally have
They're
seen
hard
people
on themselves.
They're really hard on themselves. If people just took the time pressure off, or the expectations that after a year I'm going to be okay again, I think sometimes it can be 3 years before you begin to feel any sense of normality. You will still be functioning, but it's going to be, you're kind of functioning with a really heavy heart.
Another really important tip, I think, is remember Christmas is only one day.
Yes.
It will pass.
Yeah.
And even that applies to a particularly low day for someone, whether it's Christmas Day or not.
Yes.
It will pass.
Absolutely. And I think sometimes with grief, just taking it moment by moment really helps. But one thing I would advise people is sometimes it's the anticipation of the day that's actually worse than the day itself.
Yeah.
So if you could just think to yourself, look, what am I dreading here? I'm dreading a date. I'm dreading what it's symbolising to me. I'm dreading the fact that my family has changed and it won't ever be the same again. So if you could talk yourself through that, and I'll put up this really nice technique that you can do called soften, soothe, allow, and basically say a feeling is coming up for you. You connect with the feelings. So say often with grief, it's in your heart. So you literally sit down, you put your hands in your heart, you connect to the feeling and you soften the feeling, and then you allow the feelings to come up. And I think that's where people get stuck, is that they're trying to push it down all the time.
Yes.
I must be happy, it's Christmas Day.
I must cope, I must get through,
And then you allow them
Carry
up.
on regardless. Yeah, we have to
regardless.
get back into our routine as soon as we can, and
Yeah.
you don't have to do that.
No.
And people understand it too.
People do.
If you say I'm not putting up a Christmas tree, you got absolutely
That's
no problem.
fine.
Yeah.
No problem.
I think it's our own expectations.
Yeah.
Or we're going abroad for Christmas, things that we might have been shocked by. You're what?
Yeah.
I think it's okay to think
Yeah,
outside the box, isn't it?
Absolutely. Give yourself space and think about, look, what would be best for us and our family this Christmas? It's one day, but it's a day that's bringing up a lot of dread and fear for us. So let's see how we can manage it in a way that actually we can just be together.
Yeah, you've suggested some books as well, Alison, that might help people.
If we put them up, I'll put them up on the Be Well
on our
Facebook page. Yeah, and
brilliant.
just how to kind of basically how Christmas is affected by grief. But there are good sources out there.
We'll pop those details up on the Facebook page. Thank you for coming in.
Thank you
Thanks,
very much.
Alison. It's a really important subject. I feel like I really need a good cry.